Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 3 today of today's Mineral Industry Skills and Education Summit. Before commencing, I'd like to, and on behalf of the panel, acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land we meet today, the Ngunnawal people and the Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And on this day, I would also like to extend my respect to those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Amanda Baker, and I currently hold the role of Regional Vice President for Human Resources for Newmont, Australia. I'm delighted to be here today to chair the session with you on the future of minerals workforce. I'm truly looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have to how we further attract and retain and build pathways for people in our sector. For myself, the mining industry has been a very rewarding and stable journey. Who would have thought that 15 years ago I would have been sitting in an office working in an environment very far away from trucks and shovels, or being in an underground environment. But since taking that leap through the pathway that I've taken, I've worked in over 10 different sites through Queensland, WA. I have worked in different commodities such as lead, zinc, coal and now gold. And I've been developed by many different leaders and organisations in both operational and professional roles. So I'm very grateful for what the industry has given me. Also, my closest family members have benefited and taken different pathways to this industry. My mother, up until last year, was a frontline operator through a Clean Skins program. My brother started out as a trainee driller and now holds a leadership role in specialist blasting services. And finally, like the old adage, I met my husband in the mining industry. We first met when he was coming through a graduate program, just like me in a graduate program. And now I have 2 sons of my own, and they're curious about the mining industry. So being aware of what would attract the next generation is really important to me. So the industry has so many different pathways, and I'll do my best to pull on the examples that we use today for this discussion. I hope today's session will shed some light how we can pursue a mix of traditional and unique training opportunities to attract the skills we need in the decades and hopefully longer than that ahead. We all know how to attract and retain people into our sector. It's all about getting the right value proposition for them. But in the future, some would say to attract the talent we need, it'll hinge on how we offer the work and where we offer it. And moreover, we need to be conscious of how the mineral sector is seen in the community to ensure that we have people guiding them to work for us. In short, we need an approach that's not only robust enough to meet the future demands of the industry, but also takes into account the social changes that we are seeing, although gradual in some places. On these points, I'll be really interested to hear from our speakers to gain their perspectives on how they see workforce pathways into the mineral sector developing given impact drivers such as automation, remote working and online learning. And also, with pathways in place, how do we attract the skilled workforce we need, and more importantly, how do we keep them? Each of today's speakers bring a value perspective from a different angle, and we will work through the discussion to acknowledge the progress that we've made to date and the challenges that we see ahead. In starting out, it is worth recognising the work of the Minerals Council of Australia. They have done a lot in this space to progress this work, especially with working with the Australian government and building on the Mining Skills Organisational Pilot, which we've talked a lot about today. I look forward to hearing from each of the panellists on their views on the structured pathways the MCA are putting in place. For my part, I wanted to focus a little bit on the attractiveness of the mineral sector. From MCA research and from my own experiences trying to recruit for people in this industry as an employer, there is a perception for many Australians that the industry is just not for them. especially those without direct experience. As Val said, We used to have Father Son rule in Queensland, that wasn't that long ago. For us, we need to consider, are we doing enough for our local communities? Are we responsible in managing the environment? And critically, is the mining sector still a blokey, rough and ready workplace that lacks diversity? Of course, any negative perceptions do not reflect the reality of today's minerals sector. We are mostly leading an environment, social and government's performance in the Australian economy. And overall, we are making progressive strides in inclusion and diversity. This is not to say that we don't have a long way to go, and every woman or person of non-binary gender will recognise that. But as employees' expectations change, so does the need of our industry and the roles of the future. For Newmont, inclusion is one of our core values, and we have a global inclusion and diversity policy and standard that sets out the framework for our company. I also know that all of the MCA members have similar frameworks. Newmont's approach is principle-based, but it's really practical. It's site-led and employee-driven, and our approach rests on building programs that build awareness and understanding the importance of inclusion and diversity in our workplace, creative working environments that are inclusive for people, and fostering diverse talent pools. Our commitment to diversity and inclusion has real business benefits, as we were talked about over the last couple of days. And unless we're an attractive place to work, we will not attract the best talent or get the talent that we need or retain the talent that we have to keep our operations producing. Our employees hold many of the keys of success in attraction and retention, and listening and learning to them is an important way of doing business as we develop future strategies to meet their expectations. Our approach to fostering inclusion and diversity with our workforce has been through our business resource groups. And yesterday, on the first day of the summit, Tom showed you a picture of the truck that we talk about. Our BRGs, as we call them, are voluntary, they're employee-led, and they're formed around common interests that are dedicated to an inclusive and diverse work environment. And I'm delighted to say with the introduction of autonomous haulage at Boddington Gold Mine, our so-called rainbow truck has become a signature image for the company's commitment to inclusion and diversity. The Rainbow and Pink Truck initiative was driven by a site BRG and is dedicated to promote inclusion and diversity at that operation. I think these groups are vital in making our sites attractive and supportive places to work because it comes from the ground up. With that said, a focus on a healthy and diverse work culture is a necessary ingredient for attraction and retention, and I look forward to hearing the perspectives and expertise of our panel in regards to this today. We had a light introduction from Tanya earlier, but let me go into a little bit more detail of our panellists. First up, we have Professor Chris Rawson, who is the Dean of Teaching and Learning for the Science and Engineering faculty at Curtin University. Chris studied environmental science at the University of Technology in Sydney and has a PhD in remediated site assessment. Chris joined Curtin as a postdoctorate researcher in 2009, applying techniques developed through his PhD research in marine environments on the Northwest Shelf. Chris was appointed to a teaching and research position in 2012 with a focus on industry-facing research specific to the impacts of marine pollution, in particular the impact of dredging on oil and gas developments in commercially important fish populations. Since 2015, Chris has moved through teaching and learning leadership roles such as the Associate Dean for Learning and Teaching in the School of Science and as the Science Curriculum Lead. Chris is now the Dean of Learning and Teaching for the Science and Engineering. Welcome, Chris. Next, we have Sonia Demeno, who is the Strategy and Performance Business Partner for Rio Tinto Iron Ore. Prior to her current role, Sonia spent over 17 years in the oil and gas industry in a range of roles, including several years as the People and Global Capability Manager. Sonia has extensive change management and communication skills, which were highlighted through cross-functional rotations into the corporate affairs team. Sonia joined Rio Tinto in April 2020, which is right in the middle of the pandemic, in the role of strategy and performance business partner. She's been activated across a range of priority areas, including education partnerships that facilitate access to and inspire a wider range of talent pool through learning pathways in the modern mining sector. Sonia is committed to building a pipeline that is fit for the industry, not just of today, but for the future. Sonia is also the co-chair of the MCA Learning Pathways Working Group and a member of the MCA Workforce and Innovation Committee. She brings a deep knowledge of the mining skills organisational pilot and brings industry focus points where it relates to vocational education and the training sector. Welcome, Sonia. And finally, we have Chris Caldicott, who is a graduate geologist and alumni of the University of Queensland. Clint completed his honours degree in 2018 and before commencing his graduate program with Glencore in 2019. Clint currently works at the Valeria project. Valeria, sorry. I knew I would say that wrong, sorry. Throughout this time, Clint has blended his time across open cut, underground and exploration, so he's certainly seen a lot of central Queensland. Clint is a current pilot tester for the new Foundations of Modern Mining Micro-Credential Professional Certificate. This program was developed by Curtin University in collaboration with the University of Queensland and has been sponsored by the MCA. Welcome, Clint. Okay, I'm going to put myself over here. Perhaps a good place to start is to ask the panel about their experiences in the sector and what they think is the best way to attract and retain people. Certainly Chris from an educational perspective, Sonia from an employer perspective, and Clint as a talent. Chris, Curtin University and the University of Queensland developed the Foundations of Modern Mining Micro-Credential program. Can you tell us, first of all, what is micro-credentials? And secondly, tell us if they're a useful education product for attracting and retaining future talent for the mining industry.
Sure. I guess to start with, micro courses or short courses are obviously nothing new. We've been doing executive ed and continuous professional education for decades. The opportunity we have now around micro-credentials is really how we start to put a value to that is more than just the learning in and of itself. So from a university perspective, that's how we provide potentially credit into what we do, but things that can build into something that is more than just the learning. In the case of the MCA-sponsored project, that culminates in a professional certificate. The way that we've built that is through looking at each of those modules as having a certain amount of credit towards that endpoint, which is the professional certificate. A lot of universities are working into this space at the moment and trying to figure out how we do that within our regulatory construct and how we can start to build frameworks for micro-credentialing that provide that value across a lot of different dimensions. In her opening remarks to this summit, Tanya talked about agility and responsiveness, and I think this is one of the places where micro-credentialing and micro-courses, working with industry in partnership, can really start to look at that, how universities can start to provide that agility where we're large dinosaurs that take a long time to shift, but these sorts of things that are not tied to 2-year, 3-year, 4-year courses allow us to do things in a little bit more of a responsive way. And I guess the second part of your question about attracting and retaining, I think that when we started off this project, it's probably worth reflecting on a session that we held in Perth. I think it must have been 2 weeks before borders shut for COVID at the beginning of 2020. Our University of Queensland colleagues came to Perth and we had Lisa Costa from Rio came, and we really delved into the personas that we were trying to attract through this or work with in this particular project. And they were very much referencing the sorts of things that Craig talked about, which were the transversal and the transferable skills. So the transversal being how are we giving people a flavour of what the industry is about and trying to attract them into the industry. For those who are already in the industry, how can we work with them to upskill within the industry, to give them a little bit more knowledge that might take them to the next role that they're looking for within the industry? So part of the overarching design of the project was really about both of those two things. So I think micro-credentials, when they're done in concert with industry and in partnership with industry, can really work well into both of those spaces, the attraction and the retention. I think there's a danger in universities in particular doing these things in a very inward way, and it is one of those areas where we very much need to be outward looking and in partnership.
That's great. So on the back of that then, Sonia, Rio Tinto was a pioneer in establishing the first automation and remote operations qualifications in a vocational sense. How important do you think it is for industry's role to partner in building these qualifications?
That's right, Amanda. Rio Tinto, in partnership with South Metropolitan TAFE and the West Australian Government, released the first nationally recognised, I've got to get the words right, automation qualifications. They developed, accredited and delivered them, which was really exciting. It was first in industry and it was wonderful to be a part of. It was before my time, so I came in at the back end. But it's really important, and it's been a wonderful venture for us to partner with educational providers, as Chris has said. So building on that, in that instance, it was with TAFE. But we really want to harness that and continue the collaboration with educational providers and universities in the case of the micro-credentialing. The intent of the VET automation qualifications was about building the qualifications in our existing workforce to be ready for the change in automation that was coming at us, and also to provide it to the broader Australian public, so for other people within the workforce to have the opportunity to upskill as well. Excuse me. It's really a great time for us to be working with our educational providers, and we've got a really good example currently. So last week, Rio hosted some members from the Minerals Council of Australia who, in relation to the MSOP, the Minerals Mining Skills Organisation pilot, and we took them up to our Marindoo and Tom Price mine sites to look at our heavy-duty diesel fitter apprentice. So that was part of the apprenticeship hub, and look at pulling it apart and seeing what's working well today, what's going to work well for the future, what we need to remove and what we could consider including. So we're really trying to look at our apprenticeships as they exist today and make sure that they are still relevant and providing our employees of today and tomorrow with the skills that they will require. So it was really awesome to be a part of that.
Oh, that's great. So Clint, Chris mentioned that it was not only built on fostering further development for people that are in the industry. You're one of the first students piloting the program. Can you let us know what your expectations are of the program and how you feel it will enhance your career?
Yeah, can do. I guess as a pilot tester, I've not only partaken in the course, but also been able to provide feedback to the MCA and also the universities that deal with it as well. One of the greatest things about the program is that it's actually publicly available and it's also free. So this can actually introduce a lot of new students, whether that's school-age students or people in the community who are just interested in mining to come along and learn. So that's pretty awesome. Secondly, as somebody who's already in the industry, you can take a paid version of it, and that can count towards credit towards a university degree. And as you were saying, in my sort of sense, I can look towards other skills and following that on with a university degree with that credit that I gain from this certificate. So it's pretty cool.
That's excellent. So back to you, Chris. The last couple of days we've been talking about skilling a lot. We certainly understand that there's a mining engineering shortage, and everyone should be talking to people they know about enrolling quickly. But for yourself, you've recently, Curtin has gone through and refreshed the undergraduate mining engineering curriculum to reflect the contemporary and emerging issues of mining. How do you think, again, back to industry, how important is it that we have an industry-aligned curriculum, and what part should we play in enhancing the graduate outcomes for this program?
Look, for this particular program, the industry alignment we need to see as A1 mission critical. I think without it, we're in some strife. universities, again, speaking in more general terms, are trying to build in more industry engagement throughout courses, and we have federal government signals that are going to require us to do that more and more. For the mining engineering curriculum that we've got, I guess reflecting back onto where that came about, we undertook a large external review of our mining engineering curriculum. I think there's people in this room who are connected to that review. And what came out of that was the sorts of questions was, great, but where's your digital? Where's your automation? Where's your ESG? And those sorts of questions that came through really loud and clear gave us an idea that we'd been on a pretty good track with our mining engineering and technical terms, but we missed some of the rapid expansion, the rapid divergence that's happening in industry. And so we were able to bring that back and start to bring that back into alignment with industry needs. But again, that's taken that ongoing connection with industry. It's also taken a lot of work with our academic staff to bring them into working with industry one-on-one as well. We've employed a person who is an industry liaison in that area who can work with our industry partners to take our students out into industry and bring the industry in a more in-depth way. Look, the answer to your question in terms of how important it is, if we don't have that engagement and we're producing mining engineering graduates, that's great, we're providing mining engineering graduates, but if they're not ready to be, I don't like using the term job ready, but if they're not ready to enter the workforce and then be upskilled within the job very quickly, then we're not doing our job as a university in that sort of space. So it is critical for us, and that's been a really interesting journey to see alongside things. And again, for any of the companies in the room represented in any of that process, thank you for your engagement in it.
That's great. So, Sonia, we've heard a lot about the MISOP, or the Mining Skills Industry Pilot, which is actively working to implement more efficiencies into the training system. What are your observations about the skills organisation so far, and do you think it has a benefit for both organisations and learners?
Absolutely. So it's been awesome to be a part of it. As Tanya mentioned previously, there's 4 different hubs, and one of which I spoke of earlier. And you can see they're actually making quite awesome headways on track, which industry could not do alone, although we'd like to think we can. But certainly we can when we work together, and we can when we work with the educational providers. It's awesome to have a vehicle such as the Minerals Council of Australia, and it's important that we continue to support them in order for us to bring great change in at a time that is pivotal with technology moving so fast. We need as many people working in the same direction to get the outcomes for all of us.
Great. And Chris, back to you. You're obviously passionate about what you do, because I've talked to you about this a little bit, but what do you love most about being an educator in the minerals sector?
Look, I think anyone in the university sector can talk about the work with students and seeing the aha moments that those students have when they get something and when they really see the benefit of what they're doing and the direction that they're heading. And I think, again, with the work that we've done through the redevelopment of our mining engineering, we're now starting to see our second year students come into that redeveloped program and see them working in with the time they're spending out with industry, is kind of seeing that light in their eyes. I think that what we do as universities often is open doors, and I think that's really what I'm enjoying most about my work with the minerals industry, is providing students with a door that shows what's possible and how we can prepare them for work in that industry. And I think the other part that I'm looking forward to is looking beyond mining engineering and looking at our other courses, particularly within science and engineering, and looking at those transferable skills that we have in our data science students, our physics students, our mathematics students, and opening that door as well and showing them the range of jobs that sit within the sector. I don't think we do that well enough at the moment. I think we're still a little bit too constrained in our thinking as a university as to the sorts of sectors that our students are going to go into. And I think probably the last thing is that I do think that I work with a number of different sectors in my role, but working with the MCA and the mining and met sector, it's clear that this sector is the most engaged that I've been involved in in really trying to work with universities in that upskilling and in that trying to make changes within the curriculum to prepare the students for that process, for that future workforce. So yeah, it is obviously very passionate, and I can talk for hours, but it is certainly a very exciting part to be for me.
That's great. So to foster that light in those students' eyes, I'll throw to you, Clint. What do you say to someone that's in year 10 and they're thinking about a career in the mining industry?
Yeah, definitely say go for it. The industry that we have is such an exciting industry. The things that we do that contributes to society and the products that we use day to day is just amazing. Through my time with the graduate program, I've been throughout central Queensland. I've travelled a lot, saw some amazing things and met some amazing people. So for a young person, the industry has a lot to offer. So the first thing I'd recommend to them is get out there. Second thing, work experience. That was probably one of the biggest things that I took away from my time as a work experience student in year 10. I got to go to a coal mine, and that really gave me the opportunity and the passion to take me to university as a geologist. And the final thing that I'd probably say to them as well is just go out to your teachers, get as much information as you can from them. They know what's out there.
That's great. So, Sonia, you've heard what Clint would say. Now, they've come to you and they still don't feel like they have the skills necessary for the mining industry. What advice would you give them as an employer?
Well, I guess it doesn't matter what you study or what your interests are. There are roles in mining for everyone. We've talked about some of the traditional roles over the past couple of days. We know that we're lacking skills in mining engineering, electronics and all sorts of data science in which we're working towards. So there's a wave of new exciting careers that we can look at. But there's also our most important asset, our people. So there's roles in human resources, learning and development, health and safety, heritage. The options really are endless, and the opportunities, as Clint has mentioned as well, are awesome. So to be a part of a global organisation, mining is an option. So I know that I'm preaching to the converted here, but if we talk about the one thing you're going to take away, it's about who can you influence. And you started at the beginning of the session talking about influencing your children. I was chatting to someone earlier today who mentioned that they're working on their nephews. The options are endless. You might already be in the industry. I know Brad's looking at bringing other like-minded people into the industry, but who is it that you can walk away and influence today as well?
That's all right. The last couple of days too, we've been talking a lot about inclusion and diversity, and we certainly believe it's a necessary ingredient for the recipe of making people stay. For yourself as a next generation young person, I'd ask what importance does inclusion and diversity play for you in part of that recipe, and is there a particular area that the mining sector does really well?
Yeah, well, diversity and inclusion is important in any industry, not just mining, but particularly through all the programs that mining has, we've definitely come a lot further than we were in the past. As a young person, that probably isn't as prominent as someone who's probably been in the industry for a while now. But what I can say is that as a university student, you see the diversity throughout your classmates. When you're a graduate, you also see that diversity throughout your classmates as well. It's a different story when you do come to the mine site. You do see that lack of diversity there. And so that's something we can improve upon, but it's something we're definitely working on. And then over time, our graduates will come through the program and they'll come into our workforce as well.
That's good. At that point, we've got some time for some questions. If not, I've got some more questions. But if anybody has any questions from the audience that they'd love to ask our panellists, please put your hand up and we'll... Thanks, Alex. This side.
The comment was I can talk loud enough. Thank you. That's Alex Bates from Newmont. And I think Chris and Clint, you may have sort of partially answered this already. But my fourth child she's just finishing high school this year and is one of 9 students doing specialist maths, one of 4 girls, and that's out of a class of about 80. That's 3 or 4 different classes of about 80. So, and I think you mentioned you've got to talk to those year 10s. I think it's too late when they're in year 10. Yep. What can we, and I know this is only one of the pathways towards attraction, but what can we do towards getting more young people interested in STEM?
there's the $64 million question.
Holy grail, isn't it?
It's something that I think, again, all universities are grappling with. We're seeing the numbers of all students who are taking high-level maths declining year on year, and we're particularly seeing it in female students. And arresting that is going to be no mean feat. What the universities are trying to do quite actively is going out and talking to career counsellors. Now, the State STEM Skills Strategy in Western Australia had a number of initiatives that sat there around mathematics, one of which was universities maintaining incentives for students to study maths, and one of those was around maintaining prerequisites for mathematics. There has been an overall decline in prerequisites for things like engineering in certain universities. At Curtin, one of the things we're trying to do is maintain that level, and we're expecting to see a short-term hit in our numbers coming through because of that, but the expectation is that what we'll hopefully see is more students seeing that signal in year 7, 8, 9 and maintain that engagement with maths. The other part that's more difficult for the universities to tackle on their own is the gaming of the ATAR system, if I can put it like that, where some people are discouraged from doing high-level maths at school by school teachers, and this is only anecdotal, so but the anecdotes are there where students are encouraged not to take those high level of maths. My view, and the view of I think most university educators in the STEM area, would be that we should be encouraging students to take the highest level of maths possible. A marginal pass in a high level of maths is going to do you better in the long run than a high pass in a lower level of maths. I think all we can do as university educators is send those messages out as quickly as far as we can, through our outreach exercises, through our engagement with school teachers. But I think also our employers also have some responsibility there in their outreach programs as well, not just to highlight the jobs that might sit in the industry, but the pathways that are going to sit there and the level of education that's really required for success in particular areas in there. So I guess that would be my word of encouragement out to the companies represented here, is to consider that as you go out and understand where the universities are sitting in what they require to get people through those engineering degrees, and to make sure that that's front of mind in their outreach activities.
Just adding on to that as well, we only had to go to the showcase today to have a look at the amazing opportunities we do have. We saw little preppies walking around down there, having a look at the facilities and activities there, and hopefully what they took away from it today was something that ignited a little passion into the robots that were there, or the rocks that were on the table. And that's what we hope that they can take away from that, and potentially they'll come to our universities and be graduates later on in our industry as well.
But also building on that, I think, the pathways that you mentioned, it's 100% correct. It's no longer a linear route. We're encouraging students not to think that they have to go and do the tough maths, or if they do and they bomb, that's okay. Perhaps it's vet next and then it's university. Perhaps your first job is a trade and then you do a professional certificate, and that ignites the passion. So what used to be you either got into uni or you didn't, it's no longer like that, and I think we really need to continue to spread that message that there's many opportunities, and whatever your first job is, it's probably not going to be your last job either.
Any other questions?
Javier from Newmont. So just a question for Chris. Obviously, you heard you touch upon a review of curriculums, and you referenced engineering. And I heard, and I was really welcome to hear that you mentioned about expectations of the industry to keep them fresh, but also the expectations, I think, around society. So you mentioned the ESGs, and just a little bit more on your thoughts on that, particularly someone working in the mining industry for many, many years, and especially like a discipline like exploration geology. They're out on country, they're going to be more than likely to come into contact with traditional owners, and how do we prepare them for that? So just a couple of comments on that.
Thanks for the question. It is a good one. It's a long-term process. So I think where we've identified those gaps in our curriculum, and as you said, it is not just engineering. It does sit in environmental science and geology in particular, I think, and how we embed those. And the questions that we've got in a curricular sense is, do we embed those throughout and thread them through our curriculum? And so every time we have a unit, do we have something that sits there around the ESG component to that curriculum, or do we sit that separate and call it out as something that's so important that we have particular subjects and units that refer to it? We've got I see this as a 3 to 5 year plan for us, to get our curriculum right in that sort of sense, working again with industry and how we build that in. We work on I'm going to kind of tangent away here just a little bit. We work on effectively a 5-year curriculum review cycle. Right now, I think we're at a once in a decade opportunity within our curriculum review cycle because of the rapidness of the change and the things that we're seeing happening in industry. For us to access that, we need to be working with industry around all of those things about how we can best do it. So a roundabout way of saying in response, we don't have a solid answer for how we're doing it at the moment. What we're trying to do is work with industry on that 2 to 3 year time frame to put something that's going to be in place for the next decade to try and access it.
Any other questions from our audience?
Thanks. This is for you, Amanda, and potentially Sonia. One of the things we think about from a policy sense is the divide between vet and higher education. Do you see that divide play out in your workforce needs in your industry? So are there the vet trained people, the higher ed trained people, or is that all mixing up now? I'm just interested in what plays out in an organisation.
Yeah, so part of our talent management process is to look for people at all levels to see what their capabilities are and future growth. And we have plans in place for pretty well every employee, or at least a pathway for them to take a higher education if they wish. I won't say everything's blended because they still do come through traditional pathways, but we do encourage that if anybody's interested, and I'll start with one of our Indigenous employment programs, people coming in through a traineeship, showing a little bit of interest in potentially an apprenticeship, and then going on further if they wish to take on some tertiary study. Our organisation, Newmont, absolutely encourages it. But certainly I've been in other organisations that have had associate degree programs who have brought on people that have taken a different approach and a learn or a cooperative sort of approach to their development. They've come into the business, they get their associate degree program, they're working to an extent as a fully fledged professional, and then just love it so much that we support them to get their other credentials through another university to finish that off. Maybe I'll throw to Sonia.
Yeah, and I think we're similar, as a lot of people are in the industry. There's certainly people on the tools, they've come through a trade, but it doesn't stop there. So lifelong learning is absolutely what we're all about, and we're getting better at that, I think. So we've still got a long way to go, but with mentors, coaches and professional support, both internally, externally, formally, informally, it means that the pathways, if a person really can't see what their pathway is, it doesn't take long for them to be able to reach out and find someone that can guide them. So we really are encouraging people. Having said that, if someone's happy in their role and they want to stay in it, it's also one of those organisations, potentially different to ones that I've worked in the past, where if that's what you want to do and you're happy with it for now, then we're happy to support you to do that as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Clint, I've got another question for you then.
Okay.
So you're obviously very passionate about what you do, but what's your favourite part of the micro-credential program that you've done so far?
Yeah, I think the best thing about it is it just gives you an overview of the whole mine operation and the mine value chain. You learn from the exploration of geology right up into the transportation of your ore at the end. So it's a really great tool for vacationer students, graduates as well, to give them an overview of the operation and how they contribute to the mine and the industry as well, and how they can interact with other people in the mine to get the best out of them. Yeah.
So pending success of this micro-credential project, what would be the next thing in the pipeline for you, Chris, from a
tertiary education perspective to partner with industry?
Well, let's get to the success part first. I should say, so I'm just going to give Clint and his crew a bit of a nod here for the value they're providing into the micro-credential project as testers of this. So the pilot now is we've got our last courses up and running as of now, and so we have an evaluation step coming in August, September, so Q3. And we'll go from there. I think the next step here for us is trying to link these things together. And how do we look at this as a suite of offerings that we offer with other providers in Western Australia, I should say, as well, so that we are working through things like advanced diplomas into articulation agreements into associate degrees. We've got the micro-credentialing package that sits separately. We've got our undergraduate engineering. How do we link those things together, and how do we work with industry to be able to say, here are the multiple access points for that industry, and how do we start to provide those pathways through? And I guess reflecting a little bit on what Sonia said, how do we show the different pathways through to all different sorts of careers? So I think that to me is the next big step, is linking it all together so we can show the package and show the suite.
Great, thank you. I'd like to invite Simon Troth to come up as General Manager for Industry Positioning and Engagement for the MCA to make the closing remarks. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you everyone who's contributed this afternoon and asked some great questions. I've learned a lot today. Particularly, I was reflecting on the fact that it's about 3 years since we had our initial Workforce Summit in Melbourne. We have come a long way since then. There was a lot of talk then about the fact that the industry, I wouldn't call it a crisis, but the industry faced some serious challenges and had insufficient direction on how to face those. Today, it's clear that we're on a very great pathway for change, I think, given the initiatives we've got underway, the increased confidence in the government. Certainly, Stephen Joyce talked about having that confidence to invest. That is a really important point. I wasn't in the room. I'm relying on my colleague Matthew here when Craig Robertson gave his address talking about a 1950s rock and roll dance for a baptised camp, showed us you must challenge the norms to create change. And of course it brought to mind the movie Footloose from 1984, where young people are deterred from engaging fully in their local community until a new approach, or Kevin Bacon in particular, came along to create that. So, and all the speakers today have talked about the rapid change, the fact that we are at the leading edge of change in the industry, and then Stephen, of course, talked about the fact that in the COVID world, people have a different approach to life. That we have been in the past too focused on institutions, not on pathways, and that's something that the MCA is very much promoting. Val Madsen, your description of a lost world in Queensland, where you had to be a Catholic, play field hockey, and have a father on the railways to get a job. When I started my career as a cadet journalist in 1986 at the Herald and Weekly Times, I was told that if I was going to be successful to get a cadetship, I had to be female, Catholic and blonde. As a male Presbyterian, I thought I'm going to face problems here, so I immediately went out and bought a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and then 1 out of 3 wasn't too bad, and I got my cadetship. But Val was all about, I think, making, meeting and beating your commitments, the words that the Prime Minister gave us last night. The cultural context is incredibly important. When we did that summit 3 years ago, we'd just done some research which showed that 72% of young Australians knew nothing about a career in mining. I would hope that proportion is now higher, because the most recent research we did showed that while more people are aware, the biggest issue for them was culture, was being protected, being safe, being nurtured. I used that word at a committee meeting earlier this week, and having that cultural context to complement technical skills and psychological health and safety. Brad, your address was quite extraordinary. I think looking at that potential of bringing more Indigenous people, particularly Indigenous managers, on board. His figure of 1,000 out of 40,000, I did a rough calculation, no doubt one of the engineers in the room will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 2.5% of Indigenous professionals that if we could attract, we'd make a massive, massive improvement. That vision Brad gave us there was quite extraordinary. Adam talked about the role of data in decision making. Not always a good thing for government to get its hands on a lot of data, but in this case it sounds like a tremendous initiative. The MCA has itself had a partnership with Covercard, which has given us some wonderful insights into employment ads across the industry over the last 3 or 4 years. I've been remiss in not thanking, obviously, Tanya for inviting me to sum up today, but also my colleagues Gavin, who's in Melbourne, Carolina and Nigel, who've been doing a tremendous amount of work in this area over the last few years. And Adam gave us those insights into big data in action and using data for good, not evil, although I did note that the acronym for the Jobs and Education Data Infrastructure Project is JEDI, and Star Wars fans amongst us will know that the Jedi Warriors are the good guys. The last session, really extraordinary, and again, the insights that Clint gave us from a relatively new entrant to the industry. This reflects a lot of what we hear when the MCA goes out and talks to young people about what advice they would give to others entering the industry. Chris, the micro-credential work, we're already getting tremendous feedback on, the pilots, and Sonia, I know we've been working together on the learning pathways, and that is already showing some great results. So today, it's been about understanding the value of why, not just what is important to attracting people here. Celebrating the progress that we've made as an industry has been tremendous, and also building a bigger and deeper picture of how industry culture is changing for the better, and showing people how we're doing that is really important. Sonia, I think you raised the point, who can you influence? We can influence people within our own networks, our families. Just this morning I took our own children to the Mining Technology and Careers Showcase and had them sit in the Rio pods with the VR, and they couldn't get enough of that. And then they held a 12-kilogram bar of gold, which was a great experience for them, and then went back to more VR and the Lego build. They were wowed by it. You know, they thought this was tremendous. So they're 8 and 10. They're at the very early stage, but they love that. The ongoing challenges for us are being relevant in a busy and rapidly changing world, getting attention. We often start with the question when we're trying to decide what approach we should take on material that attracts people in the industry. Why should I care? We already care about the industry in this room. We're already converts. I think the phrase was used earlier. But a lot of people take a lot of energy to move from that position to something where they care and it becomes personally relevant to them, and obviously building awareness. I just wanted to briefly outline a few of the steps that the MCA is taking in the future, or in the immediate future, on careers and workforce. So in around July, we're going to be releasing our Mining Careers Guide. That will have a much greater focus on pathways and a vet focus. Last time we did focus a bit too much on institutions. We'll still be including them to a very significant degree, but also building in a big focus on trades and on vet. And we're also producing a companion More to Mining Careers video series. We just put out a couple of great videos recently with a couple of UNSW mining engineers, or graduate mining engineers, Liv and Luke, who are working at Bulga Coal, a Glencore operation in New South Wales. We'll be doing more of that, looking to persuade through stories using a peer-to-peer and influencer approach. And I understand, I was just talking to QRC earlier, and they'll be coming out with a big mining engineering campaign very shortly, in end of next week. And we were discussing the fact that we have to be more creative, but getting more of this information out there in the community to our audience, our learners, and having an audience-centred approach is super important. Currently, I'm standing in the most dangerous spot in Hyatt, Canberra. It's between you and a refreshing beverage at the end of a great Minerals Week. Thank you on behalf of Tanya and our team for being attentive, being responsive, being part of our not just the summit today, but Minerals Week overall. Been tremendously successful, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks very much.